Happy Canada Day! Happy Canada Day! I wanted to make a little video for my neighbors up north. Uh, I shouldn't say neighbors because I live hundreds of miles away from the Canadian border. But I wanted to make a video for Canadian Day since it's a very important holiday, especially since its cultural identity is basically against the whole ideal of joining the United States. So I'm gonna see if I can read like a little section of the Canadian Constitution. I don't know if I forgot how the Constitution is structured, to be honest with you, but I'm gonna see if I can read the 1867 section, which I believe was on July 1st. Yeah, let me look here. Oh, I wish I was a blue job up in the sky. Oh, here we go. The British North American Act, 1867. Whereas the provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick have expressed their desire to be federally united into one Dominion under the Crown of the United Kingdom into one. Be federally united into one Dominion under the Crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, with the Constitution similar principle of the United Kingdom, where the Union would conduct their welfare of the province and promote their interests of the British Empire, where the establishment of the Union by the authority of Parliament in its explant, not only the constitution of the legislative authority of the Dominion be provided for, but also the nature of the executive government be declared. Whereas there be an expedient that provision be made to eventually administration into the union of the other parts of the British North America. Be it therefore enacted and declared by Queen's most excellent Majesty within the advice and consent of Lords Spiritual and Temporary and Commons, the present Parliament assembled by the authority of the same as follows. Number 1, parliamentary. So this is like the parliamentary. This act may be cited as the British North America Act of 1867. Application for the provisions referred to by the Queen. Provisions of this act are referred to Her Majesty the Queen to extend to all her heirs and successors of Her Majesty, kings and queens of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. I want to see if I can read. Let's read section. What is this? Part 2, section 5. Canada shall be divided into 4 provinces named Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. I thought that was very interesting. Because what it did was it renamed 2 of the provinces of Upper Canada. Here we go. Section 6. The parts of the province of Canada, as exists passing through this act, formally constitute the respective powers of Upper and Lower Canada, shall be deemed served, and shall form 2 separate provinces. The part formally constructed as the province of Upper Canada shall be the construed province of Ontario. The part which formerly constituted the province of Lower Canada shall be constitute the province of Quebec. I thought that was very interesting because I had no idea that they weren't named that at the beginning. I thought they were Ontario and they were Quebec. I didn't realize they were Lower and Upper Canada. They didn't really have that name identity yet. They didn't think of themselves Ontarians or Quebecs or whatever they call the people in Quebec. They always got that silent S in there. I couldn't really pronounce it. I'm not Quebecer. I'm not a Quebecer, I guess. An English Quebecer. I don't know anything about Quebec. But I thought it was very interesting that, Canada nowadays is like double the amount of provinces than this original constitution. I'm pretty certain, I could be wrong, but I believe July 1st was the day that was the day where they created the Union of Canada. I could be entirely wrong, though. But that being said, I find Canada to be such a fascinating country. Learning about like the fact they don't even mention the prime minister in their constitution. They say, "Oh, the legislative have pretty much all the power in Canada, right? They make all the laws. They can basically control, uh, pretty much all the other departments, right? The governor general, the Senate, the lower house controls pretty much everything, technically, indirectly. There is a separation of powers, but the prime minister controls so many appointments that there's very little checks on the prime minister's power. It is one of the strangest democratic systems I've ever seen. If you vote in the prime minister can lose his seat in his local area. So it's very rare when that happens, but if it does, it happens. In the United States, however, the president doesn't run for a local seat. It's a separate, entirely separate system. There are seats that, yes, the electors have seats, but the president himself only represents one state. So, like, what was it? Mr. Donald represented New Jersey, New York. Sorry, he represented, I think, either New York or Florida, and then Mr. Joey Biden represented Delaware, right? But you can't. Your VP, your vice president, has to be from a different state. Meanwhile, in Canada, it seems to be very Quebec centric. So like pretty much all the I know the Senate has to be, I think, 1/4 Quebec, and the Supreme Court, I believe, has to be 1/3 Quebec. So like Quebec has an overrepresentation in they got a Quebec prime minister, a Quebec governor general. Like Quebec, this controls a lot of aspect of Canadian life, and the Canadians, a lot of the English Canadians are starting to get mad, and they like the idea of not being part of the United States. It doesn't seem like there's a big push to go towards the United States, except for maybe Alberta. Alberta seems to be the one English province that has started to the one English speaking province. Is to say, they're not English, but they're English speaking province that are constituted to go into the United States. Although I do think their Albertan identity is going to start to slow down a little bit. There's two things about Alberta that I've noticed. They don't allow rats, which is just strange. So they criminally prosecute for rats, which is very, very weird because most of the time Canadian crime is done federally. It's not even done province-wise. So that's one thing. And second thing is they're very nationalistic about their oil, or provincial, I should say, about their oil, right? So I find Alberta to be such a fascinating identity. It just reminds me of Texas. It just seems like the Old West kind of identity. I could be entirely wrong on that. I don't live in Alberta. I've never been to Alberta. I've been to New Brunswick, but that's the only province I've been to is New Brunswick. But I just find it's fascinating because I got Nova Scotia, meaning New Scotland. So you can obviously tell who was living there. I guess at the time there was definitely, I guess you'd call them New Scottish people. I don't really know what you'd call somebody from Nova Scotian, I guess, but they were, I guess the people who were living there were Scottish, and then there's still, I think, a Scottish Gaelic spoken in some parts of. I think it's only like a couple hundred people left, but it used to be a lot of more people, I think. But again, the Constitution of Canada only really thinks about English and French. There's no, they don't really care about the Gaelic speakers in Nova Scotia or any of the Canadian provinces. And then what I find fascinating is they have this Newfoundland and Labrador. I know they changed their name, I think, in the 1980s, but I could be entirely wrong when they changed their name. But I know they joined Canada like 2 years after World War II, I think. So, I mean, they were their own separate dominion for so long. They really don't think of themselves like, until pretty recently, majority of the province saw themselves as Labradorian or Newfoundlander or whatever, right? So I just find Canada to be these nationalities are united more, because I feel like as Americans, right, we don't identify with our state as much. Like maybe some people from Maryland wave around their flag, or people from like Arizona might love their flag, but they don't think of themselves as Arizonan, right? You ever ask Pepper Coyote or some guy from Arizona, He thinks of himself as Arizona. No, he's gonna say he's from the United States. He's not gonna say he's from Arizona, probably. Maybe some people from Texas will. As increasingly academia will control more and more of Texas, I do think that that's going to be the case. A lot of people are going to vote for people with college degrees and have some knowledge on certain policy positions. I do think that will take over Texas, sadly, and the small government run conservative government will eventually be turned into high government position like in California or Mexico. So I do think that Texas's culture is just not sustainable because you got Mexico right there and you got California, which is has controlled a giant bureaucracy of let's help out the people. Problem is every time they make a giant bureaucracy, you just have to jump hoops through it. So I worry that's going to end Texas's culture. I think Alberta sort of has a similar we don't really want big state, but I don't know. It just seems to be to me, Canada seems like a weird place. I think British Columbia is definitely the most liberal place. I think Quebec is more conservative socially, but they are more welfare oriented. And I think that over time, Quebec will be seen more as a nation and less as the rest of the equally to the provinces. And I just think I don't know. I think the 20th century was very easy on Canada, and they almost split apart 3 times. I don't know the future of Canada. I really hope that Canada can survive the next couple of years. I mean, I wouldn't want to divide people on language or whatever, but I do think that what Canada tried to do was they tried to keep the French in, the Americans out, and somehow get rid of the people that were living there, the natives or whatever. If you watch any J.J. McCowan videos, which pretty obvious I do. I watch a lot of J.J. McCowan. He lives in British Columbia, so he lives on the west side of Canada. And he talks a lot about those 3 goals of Canada, and none of the 3 goals have really been achieved fully, you know what I mean? And in fact, I would say they're going in the opposite direction. They're letting the Americans in more. The French are largely opted out of being like the rest of Canada, and the natives have gotten more and more sovereignty. So, I mean, again, I don't think the reservations are necessarily rich, like in the United States. But I think the reason why is because they don't have the highest division of labor. I mean, think about it. What does native culture, why are natives in the United States and Canada poor? Well, it's because their culture is hunting. Their culture is hunter-gathering. It's not, let's have a factory built with, that we build thousands of nails so we can build properties and whatever, right? Now, I guess nowadays, yes, but back in the day, they didn't have as much production as the states, right? And so it's taking them a while for some of them to industrialize, some of them to not industrialize, and language is a big dividing factor between wealth. You look at the English-speaking countries, north of Mexico, and then you look at Mexico down south. Mexico is obviously richer than the rest of the Spanish-speaking countries, by at least a couple $100 to a couple $1,000, depending on which part of Mexico you live in. It's just like language. It's just sad to me that language is one of the dividing factors of wealth. I really wish that every language was equal in terms of wealth, but it's just never going to happen. And in fact, Thomas Sowell talks about that in a lot of his books. I read a lot of Thomas Sowell. I got Wealth, Poverty, and Politics right here, and he talks about that inequalities is just a normal thing. It's not something that is discriminatory. It's just a normal fact of life. One species will die out for no apparent reason, and the other species will live on. Maybe there is an environmental reason for why that happened, but for the most part, we're never going to know the answer to every single problem, and it's not going to just be discrimination. People like to think of the most negative thing, and I just think that that's entirely wrong. There's always nuance to every problem, and you'll never be able to solve any problem. And I think the only way to solve the problem is if you can control it directly. And since you cannot control certain groups of people, which is inherently dictator anyway, being a dictator anyway, or tyrant, I should say, tyranny, then you should only control what you can do. You yourself, your body is your property. You know, you don't control other people's property, the other people's bodies. You only control your body. Okay, I've gotten a little bit far off from Canada, but I do think that Canada has this ideal of like controlling the culture. Like the government wants to control they want to control people more to speak more French, because obviously the average Canadian isn't speaking the native language of Canada, and the English Canadians are starting to be like, why should our prime minister, our what do they call them, premiers in provinces, they have to learn French. The Albertan prime minister doesn't speak very good French. He was elected by English Canadians, English speaking Canadians, and he's forced to learn French because in the federal level everybody learns French. And he's like, why should I have to learn this language that my people don't even use? And so it'd be kind of weird. It'd be like if, I don't know, let's say Massachusetts, because Massachusetts is one of the highest English speaking states in the United States, right? They have the highest number of English speakers in the United States, right? Percentage wise, I should say. Right? And you told everybody in Massachusetts, oh, you have to learn Spanish in order to become a representative of Massachusetts. Well, you'd be mad, wouldn't you? Yeah, of course you would. It's not your native language. You kind of forced to speak a language that you're never going to use to your own people. And so, like, that's the thing, right? That's what Canada does, and it's not working. It's creating a weird linguistic hierarchy that nobody cares about, except for maybe some French Canadians. But that's about it. Even French Canadians are probably going to are going to disagree with it eventually. I do think over time, less and less people are going to really support this system. And that's something that worries me about Canada. Hopefully they can loosen some of the federal restrictions on the English-speaking Canadians, and hopefully they won't join the United States. I don't think I want them to, because once you join the United States, it's very hard to succeed. I mean, the Supreme Court has said you can't succeed, and that to me doesn't sound freedom to me. But whatever. What do I know? The Constitution's a little weird in the United States Constitution's a little weird. So I don't think they should be able to adapt our political system. Our political system is so different from Canada's. There's a primer and a governor are two different things. They don't exist in the same spectrum. Anyway, that's besides the point. You are someone, I'm someone else. Happy Canada Day, everyone. Goodbye.